a brief overview, very quick overview of what Dr. Pride covered on slide, mostly. And again, we're talking about a good grid down scenario from a national security threat perspective. I'm looking at it personally from an attack perspective, but we also see it from, as Dr. Pride discussed, natural disasters such as a coronal mass ejection, man-made disasters, and this would be the EMP, the RF weapons, and cyber. A bit more coordination is needed for this kind of attack, but it does happen, it can happen, and we're seeing it more and more successfully. What we're looking at, many of you may feel is worst case, and I personally tend to call it worst case, but worst case isn't what we've grown used to thinking of in terms of worst case. Worst case is never, ever as impossible or improbable as it might seem. We've been used to risk management where we throw out the outliers, where we think in terms of anything that's worst case just isn't going to happen. We need to get out of that paradigm. We need to think outside the box. Worst case happens. In a military context, what we're looking at is an intentional attack. And worst case in a military context is intentional. In fact, if you're thinking in terms of military attack, you're looking at what we call the center of gravity. The center of gravity is the head of the snake. It's that which you attack to take down your target long term and unable to respond. You do not want your target to rise up against you, and that's the intent. So, given that, could the United States experience an attack that's so extensive that hundreds of millions of lives can be lost and our sovereignty would be at stake? And I would include Canada in this. The answer, of course, as Dr. Pry has already gone through, is yes. This EMP is actually the weapon of choice for this particular kind of attack. And it would definitely include Canada, as he's already shown you. A major cyber attack could also happen, and it could actually be done successfully. Should we have such an attack, what we're looking at is, again, as some of the others have already pointed out, power, energy, transportation, communications, just about everything that you could possibly think of that's in our modern day society would be gone instantaneously. The problem in terms of relying on the government to take care of you is that not only is the civilian infrastructure dependent on these kinds of things, but the military is also. In the United States, our military depends on critical infrastructure that's run by the civilians in regard to about 90% to 95% of critical infrastructure. The military what the military uses is civilian-run critical infrastructure. This was a comment made by the 2008 EMP Commission, which Dr. Pry's already talked about, so I'll go through that really quickly. This is a buckyball kind of presentation. If you know what a buckyball is, it collapses. All of these little nodes, these little points, are indicators of the kinds of things that you would instantly have problems with should we have an EMP attack. How bad could it get? Well, it's not just cars would stop. Planes would actually fall from the sky. This is a gas line explosion. Gas lines are highly vulnerable to fluctuations in the power, and we would probably see quite a few of these. Nuclear power plants. Again, I apologize for not having Canada's here. I did not have an ability to put those in at the last minute, but we're roughly looking here at 100 of our nuclear power plants are located in the eastern half of the United States. The core structure, the stacks are pretty well contained. What the problem is with nuclear power plants is usually they have a pool of spent fuel rods. Those are not contained, generally. And we saw this in the Fukushima disaster. We saw exactly how hard it was for them to take care of those spent fuel rods once they were exposed, and how much radiation damage was caused when they were exposed. Again, this is Fukushima, by the way, this hole that shows the exposed portion. So what I've been asked to do today is talk to you about what would happen if we were to have a grid down scenario, a total grid down scenario. How would this affect us as individuals, as communities? First of all, we'd have quite a few deaths. Almost immediately, not an awful lot, but mainly due to things like automobile accidents or patients in hospitals that need some sort of life support that's dependent on electricity. We would probably have quite a few fires. We actually had a colleague who did some scientific research on this particular issue and found that the electric sockets arced when they did testing, and that it would definitely cause fires, especially if older buildings, which might have electrical faults, were involved. So if you happen to have a fire like that when you have a drought, for instance, in the southwestern portion of the United States, you would have a very, very, very bad scenario. You'd have a lot of confusion due to non-existent communications. Think about how you would feel if you were in a community and the power would go out and you would have no way for days, weeks, months finding out what exactly happened. At a conference in 2009, we had Mike Huckabee actually came out to talk to the conference, and he was indicating that there was a group of people in his own state who were without power for quite a number of days, and didn't have any kind of communications whatsoever. They were rather rural, so he took a helicopter out and was finally able to get to them, and they were so upset. There was it was almost impossible for him to describe the kind of chaos that he was seeing, because they just didn't have communications with the outside world. They did not know what was going on. So soon thereafter, you would be lacking food and water, and water comes with its own issues. There's water that you need to drink. There's also water that comes in, unfortunately, into basements and such. If you're living in that kind of an area and your sump pumps don't work, so you'll have flooding. And unfortunately, you'll probably have an awful lot of sanitary issues, because the water will quickly become polluted, because people really don't understand how not to pollute the water anymore. The government takes care of that. Same for medicines. You'll probably be lacking in medicines. If you need anything in particular to survive, if you're, say, diabetic, or there are many, many other examples, then you're going to have a lot of problems getting that medication, especially if it needs any kind of electricity to keep it viable. Fuel will also disappear very quickly, and if you have any at all, you might actually use it as a bartering tool. Cars, generators, etc., that you need to be working post-event will need the fuel, and eventually it's going to run out. As Dr. Pry had mentioned, what we're talking about is a long-term scenario. It could be months to years, and it could be 4 to 10 years. And I would like to repeat, actually, if we're without power for a year, it's been estimated that we would have between 2/3 and 90% of our population dead. So within about a week, the hospitals, nursing homes, they'll essentially be abandoned by their staffs, because the staffs have to take care of their own families, and to a large extent, those kinds of scenarios are virtually impossible to deal with in that kind of a scenario. If you read, I recommend Sherry Fink's 5 Days at Memorial, which discusses the problems that occurred after the Katrina hurricane in New Orleans. In the hospitals, where they actually ended up, because they had no communications and no indication that they were going to be rescued, they ended up killing some of their patients out of mercy. It haunts some of them to this very day. Shelters will become impossible to live with, as we saw in Katrina. Disease, of course, will start to set in, and the populations, is what initially hit me. Populations close to military facilities would start heading for the military facilities because they're looking for things like food, water, shelter, protection, and the military facilities that we have in the United States don't have that kind of thing. They have enough for their own population for about 3 days. They're certainly not going to add to that population, and unfortunately, that's going to be a very bad scenario. The population might go to the emergency responders, who would be the firemen and the police, and again, they're going to want to stay with their own families. They're probably not going to even report to work after a while. There are going to be those who roam, probably those who need drugs, drug traffickers, and those who take drugs. Anyone who's looking for food, water. There will also be a migration from the cities, because the cities are going to be the first to really fall apart. And if you think about that, especially in cities like this, where you've got huge multi-story buildings, how many people are going to want to continually climb up to the 25th, the 30th floor to get to their apartment, to get to their food resources, whatever? You're going to want to come down, and probably within a couple of weeks, if not sooner. Communities, actually, at this point, will be hunkering down and trying to protect those within the community. They'll probably not want very many people to come in from the outside. Within a few weeks, conditions everywhere are going to be deteriorated. The agricultural efforts that you might think would be started up at this time, it takes time. It would be amazing if the seeds even lasted. As you've probably seen in pictures of famines, people end up eating the seeds before it even grows. So starvation is going to be a very, very big problem. And again, the bodies of water are going to be very polluted by this time. So if we are attacked, what would be next? I would suggest that our enemies inside the United States, which is what Claire discussed, they may want to wait. They may want to wait 6 months to a year and wait until we're ill enough so that we really don't fight back. They may not. They may decide to go ahead and attack us right away. Our enemy is external. If we were attacked from an external source and they didn't have any internal operators, again, they might want to wait, but they might not. They might invade. And again, this was touched upon earlier by Claire, but remember the invasion of Georgia. This was kind of a prototype scenario for this kind of attack. The DDoS cyber attack initiated it, and a kinetic response, or a kinetic follow-on ensued. So in the event of this catastrophic critical infrastructure event, America will revert to its infancy. And in terms of the individuals, I would really like you to take this away. Think about it in terms of how you would deal with it. What kinds of things would happen to you? You're looking at no cell phones, no cars, no stores. Again, you'll run out of food, you'll run out of water very quickly unless you're prepared. You have no one to turn to. You have no government assistance. You won't have any money, or your money will be no good. You won't have any medicines. Many who are dependent on drugs will be roaming the streets and probably will kill you at some point for your food or whatever else you have, transportation, fuel, ammo, weapons. If you're living far from home, if you're a student, you may actually want to take out on foot and try to get to your family because you won't be able to contact them. If you decide to do that, you're taking your life into your own hands. You probably won't make it. If you do make it, your relatives might be gone. Or worse, they might be dead. Your pets certainly won't survive because they're going to be the first things people look for in terms of food. So please think about that. Are you prepared to survive on your own with all of those factors? Are you prepared to survive without food, water, shelter, communications, without your cell phone, without being able to text, without having refrigeration, without having heating or air conditioning, which you might not use air conditioning here, I'm not sure. if you are, that's a great thing. If you're not, I would suggest that the best thing that you could do would be to start preparing now. And that is the takeaway really of my presentation, is if you begin to prepare now, you've got a much better chance of surviving. If you have a year's worth of food, if you have a year's worth of water, medicines, anything that you might need, then you definitely have a much better chance of surviving. If you plan on using certain things like ammunition, fuel for bartering purposes, again, you have a better chance of surviving. Think about exactly what would happen to you and how you would deal with it, and then prepare. And with that, I will thank you very much. I appreciate your attention, and let's hope for the best. Thank you.